Real Talk Social Media is brought to you by Voices, the City of Indianapolis Division of Reentry, and the Holiday Collaborative Agency in partnership with WISHTV.
Welcome to Real Talk. I'm Katira Winfrey, your host for this premiere episode of a unique new series that gives voice to the youth in our community. WISHTV is proud to partner with Voices, the City of Indianapolis Division of Reentry, and the Holiday Collaborative Agency to create a groundbreaking approach to impact our youth and our community. This show is giving the youth a chance to be heard and you a chance to listen. 5 youth leaders were selected to highlight the topics that matter most to our youth. They gathered feedback from local stakeholders, decision makers, parents, and of course, their peers. Training in television and podcast production, project management, community engagement, and more is being provided under the guidance of the Voices Corporation. For over a decade, Voices has leveraged their expertise in juvenile justice, social work, and education to meet the needs of over 2,500 youth and adults from 36 different zip codes across Marion County. Through research-based practices, Voices heals, educates, trains, and supports youth and families so they can play active roles in the trajectory of their lives. Voices uses high-touch, intentional relationship-building practices and peer-to-peer structures to develop a collective sense of belonging, ownership over outcomes, and openness to possibilities. Real Talk is a youth media initiative led by the philosophy, nothing about us without us, and centers youth voice and experiences in the conversations that matter most to them. Now let's meet the Real Talk team.
My name is Deanye Valentina. I use she, they pronouns, and I'm a part of Real Talk, I think because providing voices to youth in the community is super important, especially when it's something that really impacts them. And I think, social media is something that really impacts our young people in our communities.
I'm Jeremiah. I'm here to empower, like Deanye said, to empower our youth, to inspire our youth, and to be a leader for those that don't have a voice, and to put that voice into our community and be a voice.
My name is Lakaya Berry. I joined the Real Talk team because I like the idea of young people creating their own table of power and not having to wait on adults or authority to give us a seat at the table, but rather making our own.
My name is Nadia Weaver. I'm a part of Real Talk because I want to be a voice for youth that don't have a voice, and I want to be able to bring light to the topics that are the most important to us.
So wonderful to meet you all. Now, we do have one team member missing. Jalea could not be here in person, but her contribution will definitely be felt. We are joined by a live studio audience representing youth and adults. You will have a chance to meet and hear them later in the show. Thank you all for joining us for what will be a groundbreaking half an hour. Now, over the course of the series, the Real Talk team, it picks subjects, they decide on the questions and who they want to talk to. Plus, they do the interviews. Tonight, it's Real Talk Social Media. Over the course of 2 weekends, the Real Talk team interviewed youths and adults on the subject of social media. Let's take a look at what the youth had to say.
Do you feel like, altogether, do you feel like social media is a good impact for the world or a bad impact?
I feel like it can be both, because you can get positive side of like different people like trying to actually help, and the negative side where it's just like people are just promoting bad things or doing bad things. So I feel like it's both. It's not like a positive thing or a negative thing.
I think social media can be used as good and as bad. There's obviously great aspects of social media and being able to connect, but also you can kind of have the negative aspects of the hatred and the other things that happen in that. It creates a false narrative for how the real world is, and people only see the best parts of other people or what they want to put out on a platform, which can be very misleading. Social media can be used kind of as something shows like the false side of reality, and social media, your platform and your account should be able to express you and yourself other than like what other people want. Like social media can use like your artistic side or to express your voice to people who don't have one or the opportunity to have one.
How has it impacted your life so far?
I don't feel like social media impacted my life, honestly. I feel like social media is what I want it to be, because social media, you only see stuff on social media of what you follow. So for me, I feel like everything been positive on social media from my end.
Nobody told me, when I was downloading Instagram or TikTok that I would be watching, like my screen hour got to 17 hours, like it was really bad. Like nobody told me that. There was no awareness about it. So I think just awareness in schools would definitely be a great first step, because a lot of people don't know, especially these younger kids. It's like kids are having phones, walking around with phones at like 13, 10, 9.
Do you ever feel addicted to social media?
Yes, I do feel like that, and that's why I have to delete it, because I feel like I can be on TikTok. It's like 2 a.m. in the morning, and I'm like, I'm going to go to bed at like 10, but I'm on it for 4 hours. So I have to just pause myself and delete social media, because I can't be on it too much.
How much time on average do you think you spend on Instagram?
I'll say at least like 5 hours. Like
5 hours?
For the whole day.
The whole day?
Yeah.
So what do you think makes social media so addictive?
I think it's just the ease of access combined with the constant stream of like information. Like you just get a constant source of like the dopamine and the videos that make you feel good. So it's like you just get a constant rush of it, and anything in great quantities can be addictive. So if you're watching hundreds of TikToks a day, you know, eventually you're going to start watching more and more.
How do you think social media affects your mental health?
I feel like social media affects mental health when you see a lot of people on social media doing things, and you see that suicides is going up, and social media can be a big impact on the youth, especially when a lot of people portray certain things. And it's sort of sad to see, but at the same time, I feel like we need more counselors and things like that in schools for the youth, but a lot of people can't afford it. So I feel like social media does have a big impact on youth.
I can say in my personal experience, my mental health has been affected by social media. Now, I'm gonna get a little vulnerable here, but I think my mental health, specifically my levels of anxiety, have been affected by social media. I recently got diagnosed with anxiety, and anxiety has affected depression in me too. It's kind of hard to say because I spend so much time on social media, and I've been trying to decrease the amount of time, but it's such an addicting thing to be on, because you can swipe for so long and you can just keep going for hours and hours in like a funnel of watching videos, that your brain just gets warped into the ideas that social media is catalytic. And when you look back into your own life, it can be kind of disheartening to see that you're not perfect, your skin's not perfect, your life isn't perfect like these people and influencers are showing. And as a young girl, it's really difficult to see that everybody else look like they're succeeding and having fun, even your own friends too, and your family. Everyone's out partying or hanging out or just celebrating life, and you might not be in a really good place. So when you see that, it can be really hard on your mental health.
How do you think media affects young people?
I think the biggest thing to most young people is it affects how they view themselves. I mean, like you're scrolling through Instagram looking at like hundreds of supermodels a day, especially I feel like younger audiences, they'll feel like they have to look like that. Not look like that, but they feel like they're having to compete with that, even though that's like outside the norm. Like that's an outlier, not the normal. But you just see it so often, you begin to think that that's normal and that you're below normal, and that can affect your self-esteem and your confidence.
Wow, powerful stuff, great introspection. So I want to turn to you all and ask you, what did you take away from that? We'll start with you, Deanya Dior.
The biggest thing for me was just listening to what they had to say. I think, you know, they provided so much insight that even I didn't see as a person. So I think that was really interesting to hear what they had to say that we didn't even as the young leaders expect to hear, if that makes sense.
And Jeremiah, for you, were there any moments that stuck out for you that you personally related to, or any other takeaways?
Yes, it was definitely the anxiety portion. As she said, social media can be a way to spread positivity, but it does have its negative connotations, and when you get involved into that negativity, it'll really mess with your head, and the more that you listen to it, the more that you are influenced by it, it does even worse.
Well, I was really excited to hear about the awareness. When you stop and think about it, people are aware of the challenges once they think about it. Lakaya, is that something that you realized, or maybe didn't realize how aware you were of the pitfalls until you sat and thought about it?
I wasn't the most aware about it until watching the interviews with the young person, Rosie, and she talked about how her social media usage has kind of led to anxiety and depression diagnosis. So I wasn't aware of that piece of it, but I will say one of the key takeaways for me was just the lack of resources that young people have to deal with their anxiety and depression and their mental health issues in the school. One of our young leaders, King, brought that up in his interview, and I think that was something that just always stuck with me, how our generation has this hyper usage of social media, but it hasn't been coupled with the resources and the tools to deal with that.
Looking around, does it make you feel better knowing you're not the only one who may be having some of those same feelings or may experience some of those same addictive tendencies with the desire to wanting to scroll? Was that somewhat comforting to know you weren't alone in that?
It's definitely comforting to know that other people go through the same things that I do every day, especially the anxiety and the self-esteem issues. I don't want to say nice to know, but it's kind of comforting to connect with somebody on those levels.
Absolutely. Well, definitely eye-opening for me to know just how aware you all are able to become by having those conversations with one another. Now, the following weekend, the team turned their attention to adults and took some different approaches to those questions. Let's take a look at what the adults had to say.
How do you think social media has had an influence on our youth?
It has had a very strong influence on the youth, but in a lot of, from what I've seen lately, it has been somewhat of a negative nature. I feel that the youth sometimes do not know how to have a human interaction with someone, and they use social media sometimes to advocate for themselves when they need a human interaction to advocate for themselves.
Now we have a simple device that connects to the entire world. And not everyone always has good intentions. You're trying to give them that autonomy, but at the same time, the people and the influences out there, you don't always have control of what your kid is being exposed to.
You know, you lead a youth organization, Voices. How do you think social media affects the young people that you work with on a daily basis?
A lot. Most of my work is in delinquency in like the criminal justice field, and so what I see a lot is the retaliation, the fights being started, some of the things that we're seeing in the community like beef and in the schools and those kind of things. That's what I'm seeing on social media. Particularly some of the young men that we work with, there's a lot of diss tracks put out on social media or talking about, you know, young ones that have lost their lives to gun violence, and that kind of keeps this, you know, cycle going. And so that's the negative side that I see the most.
It provides just the access to have those confrontations. They didn't have it before. Before, when you leave school, you go home, it's with the neighborhood kids that you have access with. Now you have access to thousands of kids that you can get into with. They argue over social media. You're seeing things that you've never seen before, just because you have access to social media. So therefore it's going to increase what kids want to do, how they want to do it. They have more access to guns simply because of social media.
Would you say young people may be more susceptible to being influenced? You mentioned influencers on social media and lifestyle, and you know, we're constantly filming our homes, everything about ourselves. So would you say young people are more susceptible to those influences?
I think that as human beings, we are susceptible to influences just overall because we learn and grow from each other. So there's always like this back and forth. But for young people, I think that it is a little bit more intense because this is the world that you've always known. Like, it's been normalized, like this is what you've been around forever. So it's literally been embedded in your life from the beginning. Like, my niece is in high school and she's been on social media since she was born. The one thing that I will say about young people on social media, I love how you all have changed people's ideas about what it means to be a creative. You really have the opportunity to take things into your own hands.
You know, maybe you saw this very troubling image on social media. Now, let's talk about it inside of our home. How can more parents start those conversations? I think most parents, like you said, this is confusing for them because we didn't grow up with all this, and so we don't even know what could be out there. But how can parents start those conversations with their kids?
I think one is to acknowledge that it is difficult. The feelings that a parent has, if you have those feelings, just imagine what your child is feeling. So if it's difficult for you to come to them, they may have a difficulty coming to you. But the thing is if you acknowledge that it's difficult, you're aware that it may be difficult for your child, and you can talk to them about that. And that can start off that conversation about the difficulties. If the conversation is difficult, what you're watching is difficult, you just talking about that opens it up about that difficult conversation like that. And I know that I had with my daughter, we always discuss how difficult conversations are because we do have an age gap within us, and so we talk about those things definitely.
I don't know there's much that we can do outside of educate ourselves and make sure that parents are aware. When we see kids posting with guns or, the content is questionable, I'm always picking up the phone and calling somebody's mom. Did you see what your child put on social media? And so I think the education part of it is huge. Parents, one, need to understand that the genie's out. We're not going to put this back in the bottle, but we have to make sure that as parents and as community members, we're educated about it. I stay on top of my kids' social media use in the program and outside of, my own kids. Just making sure that we talk to young people about the dangers of it. Once it's out there, it's out there. Jobs are looking at social media when they're screening applicants, and just making, again, that education, making sure that folks are aware.
Always good to hear those interesting points of view. Now, did any of that conversation surprise you, Dianye?
I think for me, hearing, the different perspectives of the adults, right? Because they had perspectives that, a lot of us had never heard from an adult, right? So I think, hearing that, sometimes that they see what we see, but they also see some positive and negative things that we don't see.
Did any of those conversations surprise you, or did you go in with a pretty open mind to hear what adults had to say?
I went in with an open mind, because if I went in with expectations, I wouldn't have got as much as I got out of it. And when I went in from the adults, it was more of that foundational, it's more of that inspirational, influencing and being that guiding light for our youth, not like Dianye, being positive instead of getting all of the negative out of social media, and allowing the adults to speak up on things that confuse them as well, and come into that agreement and being one with each other. It was really outstanding.
I think I went in a little bit more with my own biases against social media, and so hearing that adults had actually seen some of the positives. I think one of my interviewees had mentioned that she's able to have really good job security because she is so tech savvy, and she can always, have a marketing job or a social media communications job. Social media has been a way specifically for young people to define what being a creative is. Young people are all on TikTok creating new dances and new remixes to songs, and so we have this social media as a medium to really just express ourselves creatively that we haven't had before. And I think those points being raised during the interviews was something that I hadn't considered, but it was very eye-opening.
And we haven't talked about this yet, but in terms of young people, you all run the spectrum. So we're talking about young people and we're talking about adults. For you, Nadia, was it good to see that those two worlds found a common meeting point in seeing the benefits, the negatives, that you weren't necessarily so far removed from one another?
Yes, it was very nice to see that adults and young people can actually relate on a lot of fronts, and adults can actually see what we're saying and what we mean when we say certain things, and they can see how social media affects us negatively or positively. It was really nice to see that. Yes.
I'm sure it had to be really refreshing, because I can imagine going into it, it's like that, oh, back in my day, you might have had that concern from hearing from the parents. So thank you so much for that. Now, as we mentioned at the top of the show, we are joined today by an audience selected by the Real Talk team who have been watching and listening patiently. I think it's time we brought them into this conversation. The mission of this initiative is to foster good conversation. We would love to give you, our audience, a chance to weigh in on the experience today. And if you have any questions for the team, you are welcome to engage with them as well. So we're going to turn to the audience. Does anyone have any burning questions they'd like to ask the Real Talk team?
My name is Sean. My question is, what are some things you see on teens or kids' Instagram that is a big impact? And what do you think is a solution for that?
For me, I think what I see as the biggest issue is not only the glued face, but I think what's happening in this glued face is there's so much curiosity on social media that you're seeing throughout technology as a whole. You're seeing so much, curiosity. So then, you're not willing to ask your parents or your guardians per se, what is this? So you're doing your own research, and then some of this stuff could be harmful material, right? So I think things like that are really important for, young people to feel like they have the power to ask their parents and guardians questions about what they're seeing on social media.
Hi, I'm Cadence. I think my biggest takeaway from, this whole thing is to see how knowledgeable our adults are in this. I think for me, I kind of consider my mom not to be very aware of what's happening on social media or, the news. She's always like, oh, you're in that phone. You're always in that phone. But I think it was really comforting to see, they're kind of aware of the positive impacts of social media and the negative impacts, even though they may not be fully aware of what exactly, they are and, what your child may be seeing on social media. But I think it's good that they're acknowledging it and, actually realizing that this is a very, serious matter, something that I don't really think is talked about enough.
Well, I'm happy you brought up that perspective because we talked about just how that void isn't as broad as we thought it was. That disconnect isn't as wide as some might have thought it would be. Who else would like to come up and ask a question of the team based off of what they've heard today?
Hi, I'm Lisa, and I would just like to ask, for younger kids on social media, of course, we are older kids, we see the negative impacts we have. So what do you suggest for younger kids to do? Or what are you doing to expand your platform and show your kids this is not what you should be doing? We have other things, and just inspire them to see more positive things and show them other ways to be, empowered or successful being young.
I think a solution could just be not being on social media. If you're a younger kid, I'd probably just advise you to get active in your community or get active in your school. I think maybe a lot of young people are finding their connection through social media rather than offline. I wonder how many young people actually know their next door neighbor's name or the person who lives across the street from you, or do they know who goes to church with them, or just things, building connections outside of social media rather than being online all the time. I think that could be a solution. Being in sports, getting involved in your church or your community, stuff like that.
And that anxiety element that we heard about earlier with being so tied to social media, being able to reach out to those different communities may potentially help lessen some of that. We had another gentleman in the audience who'd like to ask a question.
How y'all doing? My name is Joel. I don't really got a question, I really just got a comment. So I heard a lot about it's also positive and negative things going around the internet, because the internet is really big, so it's kind of like the world. So you're gonna have to take the good with the bad. So my only solution would be is the parents, in my opinion, because that's just really what it is. Because the internet is huge, so you're gonna have to control what your kids doing on the internet because they easily influence. So in my opinion, like I said, the parents got to step up.
Well, I know that's a huge talker too when we talk about just monitoring what you're doing, also monitoring yourself and taking some accountability in that front, because there's a lot, as you mentioned, just like the world, it's all involved. And you had one more thing you'd like to share?
I'm Xavier again, but just focusing more on that disconnect from social media and that anxiety part of it, and what Lakai was talking about, that real physical connection, that bond with other people, like in the real world. What is the thought of the cast about social media taking away from that? Do you think it takes away from that real world interaction? Do you think it plays a part in that anxiety of talking to other people in real life and connecting to them?
Yeah, I think it does, because with AI becoming a new thing, and it eventually will become I feel like it will become a new thing. It'll not only take away, but it'll blind the community from live interaction. Is nothing like going to somebody, like Kaya said, going to somebody's house and just asking for their name or asking how their day is going. It's nothing like just having a civil conversation. But social media, it's with DMs and going live and FaceTime and Zoom, it takes away from that. So
And I know we've all experienced those moments like, well, when you send a text and you're like, well, I didn't mean it that way. But when you're right here in someone's face, you can share your perspective and what you're trying to get across much easier. Well, thank you all so much for helping us extend the conversation. So I'm just anxious to get some final comments from our Real Talk team. Well, I think we'll all agree that this has been a great experience. We want to take one last time to talk to the Real Talk team and get their final comments.
I think for me, it was really insightful hearing everybody's opinions and feedback, especially regarding social media, because this is such a diverse topic. I feel like it has good parts to it, it has negative parts, and we all realize that, and I think that's super important for our youth to know.
Yes, and to add on to that, I will thank all the listeners for being listeners, for being a listening ear and giving your insightful notes and connotations on everything. It's definitely positive.
I think I'd just like to say, for any young person watching, just don't be afraid to use your voice. Don't be afraid to say something controversial or say something bold. Somebody cares, somebody's listening, somebody probably has the same opinion as you. So you being the first person to say it, it can be scary, but it's necessary. So just never be afraid to use your voice.
It was so nice to see everybody's opinions and experiences come together, and it feels like we're all one. And I think that's really important because a lot of youth don't have a person to go to or somebody to talk to about something. So seeing us up here doing it for them is a really positive thing to see.
Awesome. We are all one. I love that. Now, you have seen and heard parts of the conversation, but there is more, so much more, that we decided to not let any of it go unheard. Follow the QR code on the screen to the Real Talk landing page on WISHTV.com. There you will find all of this and all future episodes, plus extended versions of the original interviews and bonus content. Team, I understand the next episode will be Real Talk Civic Engagement. Why was this topic selected? We'll again go down the aisle.
I think it was super important for young people to know that they have the right to vote, number one. A lot of people don't know that they have the right to vote and that they have, the power to really influence what goes on in their city, in their nation, right? Across the nation, we have the power to decide who our next president is, who our next congressman is, who our next state senator is. And I think that's really important for young people to know. These are the people that make decisions for us on a daily basis, and we're supposed to be voting these people into power. And if we're not voting, we have the power right now. We're the biggest population.
Not even the voting, but just underlining engagement, just being engaged with the community, being engaged with your people. And like Diane said, all it takes is one voice to make or break the community.
Emphasis on engagement. A lot of young people, they see problems in the community, they see things they don't like, but they don't understand it. They have the power to change these things, or they have the power to advocate for the change of these things. So just encouraging young people to be more involved in their community, to be more engaged, to know who their senators are, to know who their district representatives are. Those things are important, as these are the people that are making the decisions that are directly impacting our lives. So knowing that we have the power to either vote these people in or vote these people out, I think that's important.
It's important to get youth involved in their community and in politics early so that they can see what goes on, and when they get old enough to vote, they can make the changes that they want to make. And I think it's really important for youth to know that now, instead of knowing that when it's too late.
Well, I'm excited to hear about that civic engagement. Shooting for that one will begin September 9th, so mark your calendars. Real Talk Civic Engagement will be coming up October 2nd right here on Wish TV. We want to thank the entire cast and crew and audience for being part of this first of many Real Talk specials. For everyone here at Wish TV, we are proud to partner with Voices, the City of Indianapolis Division of Reentry and the Holiday Collaborative Agency in the creation of this groundbreaking event. But most of all, we are so proud of this Real Talk team for paving the way and giving more youth a chance to speak their truth.